right, I think we are live. Welcome everyone. Let's see the chat. All right, I think all systems go. Cool. All right, let's go ahead and get started straight away. And before we start with today's session, I just want to remind you, for anyone that hasn't been part of or that is not part of my email list, I sent a new tutorial, and there is a free update to the Geiger brushes. So just in case you're not part of the email list, so that you at least are aware of the news. So there's a tiny update to the Geiger and Beksinski pack, which has a bunch of tileable alphas, like grayscale images, so that you can use them in other software like Blender or Maya, whatever you want. So it's part of the free update, so you can just get it from the same download if you already got the brushes. And if you don't know which brushes I'm talking about, I'm referring to these brushes right here. So there's an update, not to the brushes, but to the kind of like the alphas. They're like tileable alphas, so you can just grab those as well. And there is a new tutorial on my YouTube channel, and it's about masking. So I'm going to be sharing a series of tips that are pretty cool. And yeah, so the first video is up. As soon as I finish editing the next one, I'm going to be releasing them all throughout this week, I hope. As soon as every time that I finish editing one, I will put it up. So you can just subscribe if you want to get notified. It's a pretty cool series of tips. But yeah, that's kind of like the news that I've done from last week. So I wanted to make sure that you guys are aware of it. But let's go ahead and get started with today's session. All right, so YouTube comments are working. So anyone from Facebook or Twitter, just to make sure that it's working fine. Hey Ariel Motura, how you doing? Oleg, hi. Intraterrestre, Maverick Design, how you doing? Great, thank you, awesome, cool. So I don't have anything in particular today, or any idea in particular of what to do, but we can make something up. And I thought we can start with maybe like a weird different technique for blocking a face or something. But I'm happy to to hear any suggestions that you might have for things that we can do, or that you want to see on as I explain things. To try out different techniques. That's kind of like what this stream is for. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and just start kind of like blocking like the shape of a face, and I'm gonna try to do it in a different way, just to give you some a different approach. So this is gonna be the skull, the main shape of the head. I'm just gonna go ahead and bring in a trim curve, or a clip curve. Maybe a clip curve is fine. And I have symmetry enabled. This is just a Dynamesh, very low res Dynamesh sphere, but we don't need more than that. And I'm just gonna go ahead and clip this somewhere like that. Maybe that's too much. All right, so and I'm also gonna bring in my Epic pen, just so that you have a rough idea of what I'm trying to achieve here. Otherwise, it's gonna be too weird, too abstract. So I'm gonna create a face. Maybe some mustache or something. Maybe like a stylized guy here, right? So this sphere is gonna be kind of like the main head of the shape, the main shape of the head. And this plane that I created here, that's gonna be the planes for the eyes. Sorry, not for the eyes, for the forehead, and then that's where we're gonna place the eyes ultimately. So the cheekbones are gonna be here, and then we can maybe extrude the nose from here. I don't know if this is more confusing than actually doing it, so let's just go ahead and do that. And I have some face references that I collected here next to me, but nothing too complicated. Cool. Let's go ahead and append a cylinder. In fact, yeah, let's just go ahead and append a cylinder. Let's scale that down, and these are gonna be kind of like the eyes maybe, or like the area to fit the eyes. And I'm just gonna work on one side, and then mirror and weld it. But yeah, hopefully this is gonna make sense in just a second. But if not, trust me, I'm trying to create a face with this. I just want to give you like different ways of blocking, and this might not be the fastest one, but it is an interesting way to maintain like clear planes and create something more stylized. So I'm gonna take that cylinder, mirror, and weld that. So we have that. Maybe I'm gonna smooth with symmetry this bit. Cool. Let's go ahead and do the the rest. So I'm gonna append maybe a cube. Let's try a cube. So there's not like a very specific way of doing this. I'm just kind of like trying different geometrical shapes. So for this one, maybe what we can do is use the taper deformer. And this is gonna be like the chin, and I'm gonna make something very stylized. So let's go for a very pointy chin like that. And we can use, obviously this deformer is just to taper it. And this cube doesn't have like the best topology in here, so that's why it's creating this. But you know what we can do actually is, let's go ahead and go back to the Gizmo 3D, rotate it like so, 90 degrees, and that way when we use the taper deformer, this should be a lot nicer. So let's just do that. And again, with this deformer or any of deformer, you have different controllers, different cones. So in this case, the white one allows you to change that sort of tapering effect. Not the tapering effect, the profile of the curve. So, or the profile of this tapering. So I'm just gonna go for something a bit more linear. Click on accept. And yeah, this is gonna be something like that. So there's gonna be like, I'm trying to define, I'm paying more attention to the bottom because that's gonna be the jaw of this character. I don't know if this makes sense, but it's just building it bit by bit. I'm gonna go ahead and append a sphere, and this sphere is gonna be just to add a bit of volume here. Maybe we can scale it in one axis just to stretch it a bit. And this is probably gonna be where the mouth is. Yep, something like that. And we can even use or reuse this cube. Let's duplicate that, and that's gonna be the nose. But we can tweak it a bit. Let's go ahead and rotate that this way. Scale it. So this is starting to look more like a face, I hope. Right. And again, we can keep doing this. The reason I'm showing you all of that is because we can keep it like relatively easy and simple to adjust all of these shapes, and then we can dynamesh the whole thing and start like proper sculpting, right? So let's go ahead and duplicate this. Let's open this one up. Not open it, just rotating it. But I'm gonna keep using or reusing the same pieces that I already have. Let's do that in here. Yeah, I actually want to have the nose to be a bit more, a bit longer. Yeah, something like that. Which means that we might take this as well. If this is the jaw, rotate it a little bit more like that. Exaggerating things a bit, and then this one as well. So I'm just holding the Alt key just to move between the different subtools. Holding Alt and clicking on the subtool that just switches between them. Let's go ahead and bring in one more cylinder, and that's going to be the neck. Again, so that we have a quick reference. And I'm starting to think that the head itself is quite small. So let's take that sphere. I'm gonna hold the Alt key and place the gizmo around the plane, so that we can kind of like scale it from that angle. So there we go. That makes a bit more sense. But obviously we can go ahead and use the clipping brushes again and sort of clip an area like so. So yeah, I think that's starting to work just fine. And I'm gonna go ahead and define the cheekbones maybe with a cube, and it's gonna be pointy like that. All right, so hopefully this is gonna work. All right, we're getting there. We still don't have like a clear vision of the eyes, and this looks very weird at this moment. I'm gonna select the jaw, or the piece that we are kind of like using for the jaw, and that's the one that is kind of like giving me some issues at the moment. Just gonna flatten that a little bit. We can also use the clip curves to just maybe clip it a bit. I don't know. I kind of like the angle of this. And let's take the neck. Yeah. Let's go ahead and add something for the ears just as a reference. Could be a cylinder. And I see some activity in the chat. I'll just check that in a second. All right. In fact, this is something cool that I can, one of the tips that I was going to give you after. So you can take this very basic shape for the ear, just a cylinder, and we can actually hold Control and click to kind of like duplicate it within the same subtool. And I'm just gonna make it a bit thicker and smaller. And this is kind of like the mesh that I would use to connect the ear. So I'm just gonna connect it like that, right? And it sort of goes, yeah, it intersects the other piece. So that's why we can use something like the clip brushes and just clip it like so. And when we Dynamesh, all of this is going to be, part of the same. All right, let's go ahead and mirror and weld that. And we are close to something. Maybe exaggerate the eyebrow region a little bit more. And this is why I did it this way, with a bunch of like basic geometric shapes, so that we can do these type of things. Just keep playing around with the main shapes, the main forms, without worrying too much about anything really. This is just placing them, and there's a lot of obviously sculpting work that we can do, but just to start with, this is the easiest one. And then what I like to do is, for this type of thing, let's go ahead and click and create a new folder. Let's call this OR, or original. Drop that in there, and let's go ahead and merge these together. So on the gear icon, I'm going to click on merge folder, select that, and now this is not a Dynamesh. Obviously, this is still individual pieces. If I isolate different pieces, this is still just a merge together of all the pieces. But this one is really cool, because that's the next step that I'm gonna show you, the next process, to start refining this a lot more, but still have control over each separate piece until you are kind of like happy with the silhouette, the overall shape, and then you start refining and the secondary forms, for example, and blending everything together. So let's have a look at the chat. Can I see the Alejandro? The concept. I don't have a concept. I'm just giving you like a rough. This is gonna be a generic face, of different things. I can show you the type of things that sometimes I use as reference. I don't know if that helps. So I use for anatomy stuff. In case you didn't know about this, this is kind of like what I use sometimes, but yeah, it's an interactive. Hang on, I don't have the shortcut, so it's it's a little bit hard from the tablet. So yeah, it's a model, an anatomical model, but then you have like a bunch of different poses, and so you can and it's a scan, so it's like a realistic, so you can reference to that. So this is what I'm using really, because you can get close to the face as well, and you can change the. So this is what I mean. Yeah, so you can change the lighting and sort of like have a look at the planes of the face. So that's roughly what I'm trying to achieve in a much more stylized and simplified way. The planes of the face. But there's no concept. I'm not building a concept. I'm creating the concept, if anything. But it's gonna be a generic one. Cool. So I look tired. Well, it's pretty early in the morning, and I only had one coffee, so that might be the reason. There's no specific topic for today. I'm happy to have suggestions as to what you want to see in terms of either processes, features, things that you want me to play around with. I just started with a simple blocking to just basically sculpt, and as I sculpt, then maybe we can come up with something else. Hey Jevin, how you doing? Good to have you here, man. How do I achieve the forms, the basic forms on your model? Exactly like what I'm doing here. The reference source, the one that I just showed you, it's called Anatomy 360. It's a pack of poses. I think that's from Anatomy. Yeah, Anatomy 360 is the name of the website, if I'm not mistaken. Cool. Yeah. So to answer Angus' question, this is basically what I would do to play around with shapes. But now that I have this as a single object, or as a single subtool with multiple objects, if I go ahead and Dynamesh this as it is, right? This becomes, just a blob of like a mesh that I can just take with clay brush and start playing around with this and adjust it, right? but that's not necessarily what I want to do. I want to still have control over the individual pieces, but within the same mesh. So let me undo that and explain what I mean by that. So the reason I merge everything together is so that I can take a move brush, for example, with Symmetry, and I can do these type of things and move multiple pieces at once, right? So I can do this, maybe move all of these, I don't know, just to give it a bit more of an organic shape. And that's just with the move brush. So if I keep everything separate, I would have to select the subtool individually, move it a little bit, then select the next one or the adjacent one, move it a little bit, and that sort of thing. So the idea for this first step or the second step after blocking everything would be to use the move brush to be able to adjust everything at once. However, because all of these are still individual pieces, we can take something like the move topological brush and click on the individual pieces and adjust them one at a time, which is pretty cool, right? So you can click, and wherever you click with the move topological brush, obviously ZBrush is going to respect the continuity of that topology, and that allows you to do this sort of thing, right? So that's kind of like the workaround to that that first issue, which you have to move between subtools, so you can merge everything together, keep everything separate as well, and then just use this tool to do this. So yeah, I'm gonna start making this a little bit more organic. But it gets to a point that, for example, the sphere, this one right here, you might run out of geometry, right? So the next thing that I would do in this process is to dynamesh everything. But dynamesh has a really cool feature that allows you to maintain the groups. So in other words, you can work with dynamesh, but at the same time dynamesh every single piece individually, right? I'm not sure if that makes sense, but I'll just show you. So let's go ahead and do geometry, dynamesh. So if I, again, just to recap, if I do a dynamesh right now, it's gonna basically combine everything together. So it sort of keeps the groups, but as you can see, there's just a single piece. So if I go ahead and hide part of it, this everything is connected, which is might be something that you want to do. So the alternative, if I undo all of that, is to, in the Dynamesh palette, click on groups. That's all you have to do. Click on groups, and when you Dynamesh, it does the same thing, but it does it individually. So all of these pieces are not necessarily connected, right? So I can still split them if I needed to, but that way I can, if I need to stretch this thing or this thing, whatever I want to do, and I can redynamesh to reconstruct that piece of topology, I can continue working with Dynamesh like you would with any other, piece or a single piece, but you can still have the ability to, isolate different pieces, which is fantastic. So let me undo all of that, because that's not what I want to do. And I'm gonna undo everything just because the resolution was a little bit too high. I want to keep it relatively low at this initial state and Dynamesh that. And another tip that I can give you is, if you enable polish as well, every time that you redynamesh, ZBrush is gonna run kind of like a clay polish. And at this stage where you're sort of like trying to establish the planes and making sure that you have control over your silhouette, it might be a good thing. So let's click on polish, click dynamesh. So I don't know if you see, but the shapes are a lot cleaner. So I can do, let me just give you a very quick example of why I enabled polish. I can do this type of thing, right, which it looks pretty organic, redynamesh, and you see it cleans kind of like the planes. So at this stage, it's a pretty good thing to do. Alternatively, you can do it manually. So you can turn this off, redynamesh, right, and it's not as polished, but then you can click on clay polish, which is just on top of dynamesh, and that should give you a fairly similar effect. So I'm just saving some time just doing this. So just to recap, dynamesh, groups, and polish, and a low resolution, click and drag to redynamesh, and that's it. So we still have everything in groups, and we can use the move topological, that sort of thing, but we can go ahead and start using the clay brush, for example, or in fact, let's use something else just for the sake of it. Clay tubes constant with a slightly more, let's put roll distance to 5. And with this one, we can continue blocking the planes of the face, or starting to, extend something like this schematic arc, a little bit like that. Use the smooth brush. So yeah, it's just like the clay brush, any clay brush. I just like the clay tubes because it sort of has a very, very sharp alpha. You can use this or the clay buildup as well. Any of those will just give you a nice effect. But with this brush, we can do things like filling in these sort of gaps a little bit. And I'm pressing Alt as well, just to push things a bit inwards. And yeah, let's try to concentrate on filling some of these gaps first. Redynamesh all of that. And there will be a point that we will definitely have to dynamesh everything as a single thing. I'm going to actually change to the clay brush. I think the clay brush for filling the gaps is a bit better. And I'm constantly redynameshing it. The only thing that you have to keep in mind is if you're following this process, right, and you're constantly dynameshing, just for, let's say, if I'm concentrating on only this area and I keep redynameshing with polish, I'm obviously going to fix this. It's going to look good, but the polish is applied overall. So you might have to, it's kind of like applying the same polish to everything. So just need to be aware of that. Okay, so yeah, hopefully you can see that blocking those initial shapes, that it gives you a pretty good. It's kind of like blocking. How can I put this? For me, this is kind of like tracing like a map of where I want to go and have a clearer idea of where I want to achieve. But throughout that journey of going from A to B, I can just deviate and go somewhere else and try something different. But at least I have a clear idea of where to go if I started this this way. Yeah, but that's pretty much it. And again, I can take the move topological with the AccuCurve enable. I'm just gonna start pushing these things like so. Again, these are the kind of like the individual pieces, and adjust a bit of the the shape, the forehead maybe, just define it a bit more. Give this guy a bit more of a cranium here. Maybe exaggerate the nose. It's one of the features that I want to explore. Maybe push the ears back a bit. And I think the ears are like the helix of the ear is a little bit too thin. We can use the inflate brush just to add a bit of volume here. And I'm gonna start, giving a bit more shape to the neck as well. If you wanna, further refine or kind of like playing with other type of shapes in this blocking stage, you could also, let me close this gap here as well. Hang on, I'm gonna finish kind of like the shape of the jaw a bit better. Because and I like to do this from the bottom because the shape of the jaw is, you know, I can block it up or block it. Hang on, block out the jaw like this, and this is kind of like the view from the bottom. So here's the neck, but in fact the actual curvature of the jaw is kind of like an S shape like this, right? So that's what I'm trying to achieve there, just to make it a bit more, even though it's super stylized, you know, I like to keep it within the realistic proportions, I suppose. So just to make it more believable. And yeah, so another thing that I like about this process is that everything it feels like pieces of clay that I can keep moving and adjusting. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm gonna use clay brush. Yeah. Yeah. So I was saying that if you want to use other type of kind of like blocking strategies, um, you know, you can use anything really. I like to use the tubes brush as well. This is just another way to create like, kind of like pieces of clay, like organic pieces of clay very easily. Like if I were to add that in real clay, right, I would just take a piece of clay, attach it, and then smudge it and blend it. So it's kind of like the same thing, right? I'm gonna make this smaller, and I'm gonna adjust a few things. So as you can see, the standard tubes brush, if I do something like that, it's kind of like embedded in the mesh, and that is because ZBrush is using the first point that you touched on the sculpture as the plane, and everything else is going to be maintained within the same angle. So if I rotate around, this curve is right in that angle because I touch on that point, and I don't want that. So there's an easy way to fix that, or not to fix that, to change that, which is under the picker palette. You can go to depth, and as you can see, depth is set to 1Z, and 1C is once you click, or as soon as you click on your mesh, that's your single depth point, and ZBrush is going to maintain that depth no matter what. So it's going to be a plane basically that you can draw. So you can do, if I click on, I don't know, just to show you, if I click on that little corner here and do this point that I clicked on is it's kind of like setting a plane, and then everything that you do, it happens on that plane because it's 1C. It's only taking one single point of that depth. So all of that is, as you can see, in a plane basically. And that's the idea, right? So from the picker palette, you can change from 1C to continuous C, and continuous C means that every part of the stroke that you're doing, every instance of that brush, ZBrush is gonna continuously analyzing the depth. So it's basically a snapping in a way. So you can do this, right? And now ZBrush is analyzing every point, or every volume that is currently present in the canvas to attach it. So the simplest way to think about it is 1C is no snapping to whatever volume you have, and continuous C is kind of like snapping the curve. That's it. Another thing I want to change is the depth mask, and that for you guys should be under the brush palette depth. This one right here. So I have it here because it is something that I change often. Right now, this indicates that the mesh that I'm going to be adding, the center point of that mesh is right in the center of the volume, meaning that if I rotate around, and this might be something too basic for some of you guys, but it is an important concept. So this is the profile of that tubes brush, which is this equivalent to that line in there. The middle point, or that middle line, sorry, that middle line is the equivalent to whatever surface I'm using or to draw on, and that point right in the middle is just again the center of that brush. So what I can do is change these to embed everything a lot more or push it back up. So let's push this one like that and click to update. So you see it just pushes things out, or I can embed it a lot more like this. So in this case, because I wanna use this curved tube brush as a way to add like little pieces of clay to adjust the volume, I think embedding it a little bit more kind of like works a lot better. So yeah, let's just undo the placement, but I already have this in here, and you can use symmetry as well. And I'm gonna use this for the muscles of the neck, maybe, right? And we can click, and this is one of the things that I like about this. You can adjust the placement of all of that. So that's it. Maybe we can also click somewhere else to log that change. And we can do the nostrils maybe with this as well. And perhaps if I reduce the brush size a bit, we can indicate the lips, maybe. It's too big. And what else we can do? Maybe we can do something like for the eyes, kind of like eyelids. Yeah. Although for the eyes, I think I'm gonna just be more accurate with the way that I add it. So just gonna keep it like that. We can also add like an indication for the muscles of the face if you wanted to, like that. Yeah, so let's clear the mask. Right, so now we have all of these pieces that are still objects, separate objects, and we can keep working in the same way that we did before. I'm gonna duplicate it and just in case to keep it as a reference for you guys. So we can take these, right, and keep working with Dynamesh, groups, polish, all of that. I can redynamesh the whole thing and keep working on that. Now, one thing I want to do is, because I'm using the symmetry and I kind of like overlapped the things like this, I'm going to separate those. Anything that is sort of like overlapping in the middle, I'm going to separate it and then merge it back together. So I'm going to split hidden. So I'm using the Control and Shift key to isolate that piece. I'm going to split hidden again, and this piece as well. Split hidden, right? And so I have them separately because I can then use, if I go into solo mode, I can go ahead and use Dynamesh without groups to basically collapse it. So this one is just a very simple piece, but if you had something a bit more complex, Dynamesh without groups, Dynamesh without groups, without polish as well. So and that's it, right? So I just wanted to show you a way to combine this very quickly. And let's go ahead and merge everything down. Okay, down, okay, down. All right. So what I'll do is I'm gonna keep the groups, but I'm gonna remove the polish because I don't wanna keep polishing this, and maybe increase the dynamic resolution a tiny bit, right? So we still have all these separate pieces, and I'm gonna use the move topological to start blending this or adjusting the placement of, you know, these pieces of clay, so that it, yeah, it sort of feels more realistic. Another cool tip I can give you right now is, if you're gonna keep this for a while in terms of um, the placement of things, right? You can, let's say here's probably a good example. If I want to smooth this out to simplify it, I'm smoothing everything around it, right? So I can move this individually because I'm using the move topological, but then use the smooth brush, and it smooths everything that is within the reach of the brush, right? So one thing we can do is restrict the use of the brush by the topology. So if I go ahead and put my brush palette on the left hand side, and let's go to auto masking, right? If I hold the well, yeah. So right now I have the brush, the move topological. So by default, this brush has the topological switch enable, meaning that ZBrush will respect the continuity of the topology. In other words, if I click on this, the yellow polygroup, and click and drag, it's only going to move anything or any point that is directly connected to that set of points or that topology, right? So that's why it doesn't move everything. If I turn this off in the move topological, this just behaves like a normal move brush, right? That's the main difference between move topological and move brush. So we can do the same thing with any other brush, which is pretty cool. We can hold the shift key, and as soon as I hold the shift key to access my smooth brush, you see that the move topological, oh sorry, the switch topological changes. So I can hold the shift key and I can turn that on, and now it behaves, the smooth brush and the move topological are pretty much the same. So I can hold the shift key to start smoothing, and I click on this part in here, and it's only going to smooth out this bit, right? So that allows me to, you know, adjust this and only smooth out the areas that I need to, right, without smoothing the whole thing, which is, it's a pretty cool way to go about it. All right, let me smooth this out really quickly, and then I'll have a look at the chat, because I think there might be some questions about this, and I'm happy to answer them. So if you have any questions and you haven't put it in the chat, feel free to put them now. I'll try to answer them if I know how. I'm just gonna flatten this a little bit more with the trim dynamic. And by the way, these shapes that I'm using here for the lips, they're not necessarily the final look of the lips, really. They're just the volumes, and I'm gonna refine them a lot more when I get to play with the sculpting. But it's really important to sort of have that volume already there. Hang on. All right. I'm just gonna go ahead and reset my smooth brush. I don't think I'm gonna use the smooth brush with topological. It was just a little trick for you, and you can save that as well, by the way. So you can, if you like the effect of that brush, you can save it as a new brush, and every time that oh, hang on, not what I wanted to do. So move topological, shift. Yeah, when you're editing the smooth brush, make sure that you hold the shift key to access any setting of that brush. Otherwise, it's just gonna be your active brush. One more thing that I'm gonna do before I check the chat is just bring in the spheres for the eyes, just because it's starting to look a little bit weird without eyelids or eyes, and it's a good reference to have the eyes in there. Again, to try to maintain, I mean, this is a very stylized thing, but to try to maintain a bit more of a realistic proportions, maybe. Well, proportions are very stylized, but yeah, just to try to maintain something a bit more realistic, I'm gonna try to place the size of the eyes more realistically. So I'm gonna hold Control and click and drag to duplicate within the same subtool, doing that, and then without letting go of the key of the click, although I'm using a pen, but without letting go of the click, I'm gonna release the control, and then I'll keep going, and that's gonna duplicate that distance, that exact distance that I did before. And I'm gonna go ahead and also create on auto groups. So every single sphere now has a different polygroup. Center that, and I'm just gonna place these like that. Just kind of like, you know, to try to maintain a good reference, a good distance between between these shapes. Now, before I do that, let's make sure that this is right in the center. Okay. And I think we're gonna have to take this guy and mirror and weld just to make sure that it's symmetrical. For some reason, it wasn't. Now that I have these, I'm gonna isolate the two eyes, delete hidden, and that's just a quick way to make sure that the size is kind of like consistent, realistic. So those are gonna be the eyes for the character, and I'm gonna duplicate this and put that up. So one of these set of spheres are gonna be the eyes, the other set is gonna be the eyelids, and I'm gonna enter transparent mode so that when I scale it with symmetry enabled, right? This is another cool, or not cool, but a useful tip that I can give you. So now I have symmetry, and I can scale this up and down, right? But as you can see, it's not scaling from the center of the sphere, but I can use the local symmetry to scale it based on the volume. So in other words, if this local symmetry, by the way, is here in the transform palette. If it is off, right, when you have symmetry enabled and you use the Gizmo or the transpose master to scale, Siri is going to look at the center line of the world to scale from there. So in other words, when I click and drag to scale this, even though the Gizmo is placed right in here and I'm using symmetry, Siri is going to say, okay, we actually have a volume that is this big in reality, because it's just living in the same space, and it's going to use this point right in the middle to scale from here. So that's why when I scale with the local symmetry off, everything is kind of like expanding, right? Because Siri is using the center of the world. But if I enable local symmetry, then we can still use symmetry, but the volume is localized to the individual volumes. If that makes sense. So yeah, so Siri is gonna say, okay, forget about the middle point. There is a local volume here and another one in here, because we're gonna have the Gizmo in this side and in this side as well. Anyway, so just to say that to scale something like this, I will enable local symmetry so that we can scale it from the center point. And this is gonna be these are gonna be the eyelids. So let's maybe turn off the head. So hopefully you can see that. Maybe enable, no. Yeah, hopefully you can see the difference there. So maybe try a different material. probably this one. So you see the one in the inside, that's the size of the actual eyeball. So what I'm determining here is, or determining is the thickness of the eyelid, right? So that thickness, well, imagine that this is the eye. That thickness here, that's what I'm trying to figure out. Again, it's very stylized, so I'm gonna go for something like that. That should be fine. Okay, and you know, we can go ahead and start playing around with sculpting it maybe. If you wanted to, you can just duplicate that same sphere and cut it up in pieces to create the, you know what, let's do that. So I want to duplicate one, and I'm going to use the clip brushes again to clip this, a set of those spheres around there. And let's take the other set of spheres and clip it around there. That's it. So now we can take the gizmo, do that, and adjust kind of like the rotation of it, kind of like sleepy guy. Okay, so now we have that blocked in. Same deal as before, we can go ahead and merge down. Merge down. The eyes I'm going to keep separate, and dynamesh with groups if we wanted to. And we have now these eyelids as well as, you know, as the eyes, but we can start adjusting maybe like the lacrimal. Just gonna add a bit of volume here. All right. So this is still like super sketchy, but you know, bit by bit, you see, we can start generating something interesting. And now the next step would be to merge everything properly and basically do the sculpting. So, all right, let's have a look at the chat. I haven't paid too much attention today. Hang on. Pablo, do you know why when I send my sculpt to Keyshot lost quality? You shouldn't lose quality. I'm not sure what that means. What type of quality you're referring to? It should be exactly what you see in ZBrush. If you're using the ZBrush to Keyshot bridge, it should be 1-to-1. No, you know, there's no lost in lost quality. Alex, cool. Glad you like it. Yeah, Daniel Bell is awesome. We had we did a little collaboration video, which is pretty cool. The sphere you're using between the jaw and the nose, what's the anatomical structure of that supposed to represent? Just the space filler? Yeah, and basically the maxilla in a way. So it's like the actual area of the teeth. That's a volume, right? So it's covering those. It's kind of like the teeth, really, and that's a volume that you can sort of place the lips on top of that. But yeah, it's a filler, but it has a purpose. I've been trying to model a Sith holocron with a C-modeler without success. Do you have any tips in the right approach? I'm not sure what a Sith holocron is, sorry. Hey Valek, saludos desde Chile. All right, so cool. Says Gandhi, no. Is there a way to clear a curve you just drew out quickly without having to click elsewhere in the base mesh? Yes. So if you use the tubes like here, your question is if you want to delete that, as in you want to place that object without clicking somewhere else, you can do delete curve. So under the stroke palette, you can click on delete, and that's the same thing as clicking somewhere else. I don't know if that's the question or the answer to your question. For me, it's just click. It's easier to do this, or if I don't want to do that, I just undo the last bit that I did. I use Dynamesh without merging the polygroups into one mesh. That's right. So I merged everything together, and I've been using Dynamesh with groups enabled, so that keeps all the groups separate, but it Dynameshes all the groups at the same resolution that I established in here. Cool. Is if the gizmo, yeah, so if you have a gizmo and you, for example, do this, right? Is that your question, that it gets in a weird angle? You can hold the Alt key, and holding the Alt key basically disables the locking or this lock thing here, right? So if I click on this lock icon, just by clicking normal left click, is the same thing as holding the Alt key, right? So I'm more used to holding the Alt key to disable it, but you can unlock it. And what that icon means is that you can move around your gizmo without affecting anything. So it's like separating it or unlocking it from the mesh in a way. And that allows you to, center it to the center of the world, clicking on this rotation to reset the rotation, that sort of thing, and then you can lock it back on, and now you have the reset pivot, or this reset gizmo. Hopefully that answers the question. Stanislav, where have you? Cheers, man. Glad you like it. Hola, ¿dónde eres? From Australia. Well, I was born in Colombia, but I've been living in Australia for a long time. How do you get that kind of gizmo? I have the basic one, and it's horrible. So I'm not sure what that means. If you click on any of these buttons, this is the gizmo. This is the streamlined gizmo, the 3D gizmo from ZBrush since, I don't know, ZBrush 20. Actually, ZBrush 4R5 maybe. I don't know. I can't remember, but it's been a while. So if you don't see this, you probably don't have the gizmo enabled. If you see this is not horrible, by the way. This is what you see. This is the most amazing tool. It's just that it's not very commonly used, but I use it actually more often than the gizmo. Not in the streams, because I know that people are not very used to it. But this is the transpose line, and it allows you to do a whole bunch of other things. That are amazing, right? So if you enable this, it just switches between the transpose and the gizmo. I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah. You can press, if you bring it in, you can just press the Y key on your keyboard, and that also switches. That's the shortcut for that. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on. Do something a bit more interesting now. Start working on some actual sculpting for this guy. So I'm gonna go ahead and duplicate this guy, put it in the originals again. I keep duplicating pieces or subtools just to keep them as a reference for you guys, so that you can see the progression later on, if anything. And I'm gonna take this, and with the move brush, just gonna do some final adjustments here for the overall shape. Make sure that it's interesting. Most of the things that I will be doing next are just, normal sculpting. So, but it's important to have a very good placement of the volumes before going any further. Alrighty. Still try to design like the, if the forms are kind of like working or not, but I think they are. So let's go to Dynamesh, turn off groups, and I'm gonna increase the Dynamesh resolution slightly, just a tiny bit, 144. I remember if you're, let's say if you're following along and you're doing something similar, and you have the same resolution, it might not look the same as what I have because the Dynamesh resolution is based on the size of the object. So, this object fits. If you want to make sure that what you're doing is very similar to what I'm doing, what you can do is unify everything and then just try to match the resolution. But I think 144 should be fine. And because I turn off the groups, let's see what happens in here. I'm gonna hold Control, click and drag, and ZBrush is gonna redynamesh the whole thing. There's still some polygrouping, but we can hold Control and W to polygroup all that as a single thing. And we can just go ahead and smooth all of these artifacts. If you want to avoid this step that I'm doing, you can avoid getting all those artifacts if you leave the polish on for the Dynamesh. So that's another cool tip. But now we have a base mesh, a base Dynamesh, that is pretty clean. And we have a very well-defined set of planes. In fact, I'm gonna bring in the trim dynamic, and after doing this Dynamesh, I'm gonna refine some of those as well, just to try to maintain the planes again. And if you want to have a cool reference for the planes of the head, ZBrush actually has some projects or some tools that you can use. So you don't have to follow this thing necessarily. And I distorted that lips. Like I said, the lips are not gonna be necessarily the same shape. I just wanted to have a volume there. So what I was saying is you don't necessarily have to follow the same way of blocking things out. You can use other techniques, obviously. And if you go to the tools, and I think it's, no, hang on, it's projects. Is it projects? Yeah, so if you go to head planes, this one right here, or any of these ones, it's kind of like a very simplified version of what I'm doing. So, you can use that as well. In fact, I do have a cam view that is pretty handy. Let's go back. And where it is? That's not this one. So this is a cam view that I built myself, but it's, when I say build it, I just generate it. It's a pretty simple thing to do. And you can build your own with something like the planes of the face. So I can use this as a reference, and as I rotate my model, I can, adjust things. So, the relationship between, or like the proportions of the jaw area and all of these with the head, obviously in this case is definitely off. So if I want to make it a bit more realistic, it's just a matter of like start bringing this down, just adjusting the proportions a bit more. I will, it will still maintain that sort of nice stylization, but it will be moving more towards a more realistic set of proportions, which I think it's fine. Right, so let's say these areas right here for the eyes are maybe too high or too low, so we can adjust that way. Anyway, so this is just a quick way to do this, right? Let's see, any other questions about this? Some functionality of the transpose line. yeah, I can show you some of that. Although I don't know where I can use it in here. Hey, Jern, you got the UCG course. Cool. Awesome. Yes, the UCG course, for any of you guys that don't know what that is, that's the Ultimate ZBrush Guides course. It's something that I have online in the 3D Concept Artist website. So that's for absolute beginners. So, like I assume that you have no prior knowledge to ZBrush, and I cover everything from scratch all the way from nothing all the way to a polished render in all within ZBrush, and we do like a mushroom character that's pretty cool. And we have a private community as well, so it's a pretty comprehensive course, I think. So if you're interested in learning kind of like a more in-depth, more in-depth way of learning ZBrush, that's something that you can check out. All right, so I'm gonna adjust the shapes because the the head is a little bit too squarish, so I'm gonna use maybe a clay brush. So this is a custom clay brush I have, but it's kind of like the same thing as the other clay brushes. It just doesn't produces that many stripy areas. So here is where we can see the big difference in terms of the shapes. Like if we compare the skull with this blocking. I'm gonna push this back. And maybe you can use the move brush to readjust all of this. So and we misplace the eyelids, but not a big deal. At this point, everything that I do is still super sketchy. We haven't, the resolution of the Dynamesh is pretty low, so it's not a big deal. All right, so I'm gonna work on the bridge of the nose a bit more because it was, the planes were pretty flat there. It's kind of like trying to recreate the actual, if this was the skull, so this will be the area of the nose. Let me just actually let's do it with some polypaint so that you can roughly see what I'm referring to. By the way, this is another cool tip that I can give you. You can use this I would say work in progress polypaint, and that gives you a reference of, if you're playing around with proportions and that sort of thing, it gives you a reference of whether or not your proportions are right. So this is something that I sometimes do just for fun, where you can basically paint the areas that you're trying to adjust, right? And that way, when you start using the move brush, you can sort of like have a reference. Okay, maybe if this is the point where the nose bridge starts, maybe that's what I need to bring forward a bit and make sure that it's like a straight line in here, and use the clay brush to adjust the planes in here. And this area of the where the eyes are going to be, that's going to be more embedded. So I'm just pressing the Alt key to push that in. but you know, it's not necessarily the polypaint or the texture. Really, it's just a work in progress. That's what I would call a work in progress polypaint, which is something that helps you in the sculpting side of things. So I'm just adding a little bit of volume here and there with the clay brush, and then every time that I do a few strokes, I like to go with a smooth brush and smooth things out. Right? You know, at this point, it's just the chilling, relaxing time of just sculpting, and I'm playing around with the volumes. I'm smoothing everything a little bit, so I'm moving away from that very sharp set of planes that I had to something that, you know, it's a bit smoother in terms of the visual language is a lot more rounded. Let's just add some fat here to the neck. All right, I'm gonna duplicate that again just to keep a reference of the different stages, and I'm gonna turn off the polypaint now. So you see, even though it is very rough, that idea of polypainting something to have it as a reference really helps to bring things to the more realistic, not realistic, but when I say realistic in this context, when I'm working on something stylized, I refer to create something that is more believable. So even though it is stylized, it's something that could exist. So you have a reference of the different pieces or part of the anatomy that creates visual anchor points for the viewer to say, okay, this is something that I believe it could exist. So and that's really important. You know, if you know, you don't need to assume that your audience will know about anatomy, but you know, especially with a face, right? It's something that we are kind of like very used to see every day. So if there is something slightly wrong with it, even though someone might not know about anatomy or anything like that, they will very easily spot with, um, you know, that is not a realistic, or it doesn't look quite right, even though it is stylized. I don't know if that makes sense, but basically, what I'm saying is, if you if you do something stylized like what I'm doing right now, it's very important to also keep that in mind, that no matter how the stylization goes, if you create visual anchor points, something that that when someone else looks at it, it understands that it's a face. It has like certain things that it read as a face. That's what you need to, in order to create something more believable, or something that would work, or that is more appealing, I suppose. Yeah, I don't know if that rant so does anything or helps anyone. Anyway, so this is getting better. I'm struggling with the cranium here, so I'm gonna do a quick pass just to again remove the very clear planes from that original sphere that we clipped. Um, let's see if there is question in the chat. How do I get over ugly looking sculpts at first and make something good out of it? I would say just keep going, keep trying. Not keep trying, like keep playing around with that sculpture or whatever mesh you're using. Um, Everything is gonna look awful at the beginning. All my sculpts, all my sketches look pretty pretty awful at the beginning. And the ones that I think are looking great, when I leave them and come back, I realize, oh, this is horrible. So it's just a matter of keeping at it. So let me give you an example of what I mean. So this is what we have right now. It's still, not great. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to get something going. But if you compare that with, let's do a snapshot, snapshot there. If you compare that with the first thing that we had, this thing, oops, right? If you compare these two, there's quite a bit of difference. The one on the left looks horrible, um, and although the one on the right is not perfect yet, it's just a work in progress. It does feel a lot more, a lot better, and that's just time that I've spent on the sculpture, nothing else. So I would say that's the best tip. You just keep at it and don't. Well, a more practical suggestion or advice would be don't rush into detail. So my Dynamesh, even in this case, I would say it's pretty high, the resolution, but I'm not gonna start using this to create like tiny wrinkles around there, and because I'm not entirely happy with the secondary forms or even the primary forms as yet. So the ear, it hasn't been I haven't done much with the ear. I haven't defined the eye, the lips. So I wouldn't rush into adding details until you're completely happy with it. So that's one of the keys to make sure that whatever you do is kind of like successful in terms of sculpting. That the forms, the shapes, the primary forms are good. So yeah, I wouldn't rush into getting into details. Just playing around with it, and I constantly do that, playing around with it, the proportions and the primary forms, the secondary shapes, until I get something that I'm more comfortable with. But it's not an easy and quick process. It requires practice and time, like what I'm doing right now. Like I'm doing little tweaks here and there. But yeah, that's what I could say about it. Hopefully that makes sense. Um, I'm trying to model you teach. I'm trying the model you teach there on my own, just to try to figure out how to. I did it by the course to do it and fix my mistakes. um, how do I keep myself from overdoing something? For example, I've worked for 4 hours and 1 hour later the scope looks worse. Um, yeah. Um, Good question. I don't know. Like I think it is very easy to overdo anything. In fact, I don't think you ever finish anything. It gets to a point that you sort of have to say, okay, this is it. Let's just wrap it up in there and move on, because you can keep tweaking things, and sometimes, like you said, you overdo it. I've experienced that many times, and the reason as well I keep all of these originals and all of the steps sometimes is so that I can go back and say, you know what, the thing that I had 2 hours ago was a lot better, and I can just easily go back and continue. But there's no, like, if I find myself criticizing my own work, saying this is horrible, this is not gonna work, or it was a lot better when I did it an hour ago. Um, for me, it's not like, okay, I'm gonna start over again because this is not working. If I'm happy with what I did an hour ago, I can just go back in time, or I saved incrementally so I can go back, and then let's say I have save head 1, head 2, head 3, head 4, and then head 5 is where I don't like it. I can go back to head 4 and then erase anything on top of that, or keep it. But yeah, I do experience that. It's just, I think it's a lot of it's important to be able to judge yourself or your work, to be able to criticize your own work as well. Um, and but it's not an easy thing to do, because you can be either very very harsh on yourself when there's no need to, or vice versa. You could be, completely blind to what you're doing. So it's a tricky thing. All right, I'm gonna start with the clay, sorry, the damp standard brush, the move brush, and the clay brushes to sort of redefine this a bit more, especially the ear. And we're gonna get to the lips in a second. So I reckon once I blocked out the ears a bit better, as well as the lips, we can increase the dynamic resolution and play around with a bit more sculpting. But yeah, if you guys have any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'm happy to answer some more of these, productivity or workflow questions as I sculpt, because kind of like boring to just watch the sculpting part, I suppose. I'm starting to run out of geometry to play around here with the ear, but I don't want to redynamic until I've blocked out the lips. So I'm just gonna keep this very blocky with low res, and then we can redynamic. All right, let's do the lips. So for the lips, I'm gonna go ahead and establish kind of like do like an M and then like a U underneath, and then we can use the damp standard brush to refine that a bit. And of course the nostrils, we haven't done any of that, so with this standard brush. And I'm pressing the Alt key just to invert this effect. We haven't done a quick save, maybe we should do that. Cool, so sometimes I get the loop of just placing forms and smoothing. Is that normal? If you mean like you spend too much time blocking things and smoothing, I think yeah, that's actually a good sign that you're making sure that those forms are working. I would say that's a good thing. As you can see, even at this stage, I'm still playing around with the proportions with large brushes, or like a large size brush. Can't wait to see this guy with the Geiger treatment. No, probably this one won't necessarily work with that. Yeah, I'm freestyling. Don't have any concept or idea in mind. Just wanna. I think the only thing that I have in mind is like that sort of sharp, long nose. Probably I saw somewhere something like that, something similar, and it's just at the back of my head, but nothing in particular. Okay, I think we have a good base. Maybe actually, maybe refine the lips a little bit. Although at this resolution that we currently have is not as easy. So we need to have a bit more resolution to be able to continue. All right. So again, I just saw another issue here. I'm gonna adjust this before because I know this is the type of things that drive me crazy when I'm sculpting. Um, just some of the silhouette. And I think this needs. Hang on. I'm gonna show you another tip here. I think this area needs to be moved moved a little bit downward. So yeah, something like that. And I'm gonna go ahead. That's just masking, by the way, holding control, and I'm gonna blur that mask by holding control and clicking on the mask. Invert that mask. I can also hide it, and I can use the gizmo. Go to the unmasked areas, and let's just move that. Just to bring it low, like closer. Let's turn on the poly paint. Yes, something like that. So I just wanted to bring it closer. I'll show you what I mean and the reason I did that. So in the poly paint, the working poly paint that I created, let's say this is the nose bridge, right? And then this is the equivalent to this one right here in the reference that I'm using, or not reference, but yeah, this is called here. And there's a clear line in here, that matches almost the same angle of the jaw with a different color in here. So that's what I'm trying to achieve in there. But if you extend the line, there's like a gap between, the line of that bridge, or at the end of the bridge of the nose, and that line, the angle that I'm trying to achieve there. So that's why I mask that area. Let's bring that back. So just that area, I can invert the mask, clear the mask, and I'm gonna use the clay brush just to fill in those areas. Just make sure that basically I just moved the cheekbones low to a little bit lower than what they were before. That's it. Nothing fancy. All right. So let's see if there's any questions in here. Otherwise, we can just increase the dynamic resolution quite a bit and redynamesh, smooth everything. I think I'm losing a little bit of the volume here. So just use the move brush, maybe without the Aki curve, so it's more smoother. Alrighty. I think we can start working on, defining some of the volumes a bit more. For that, I'm going to use the clay brush just to play around with the transitions. And the clay brush is just a really good brush for these type of things. That one in combination with the smooth brush, obviously. So I like to maybe add, or holding the Alt key, you can also subtract a bit of volume and then go with the smooth brush to refine that. That's how I can start playing around with the integration of the different pieces that we originally created with the blocking. At this stage, obviously, everything looks like one piece, as in one mesh, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it feels as one. So, things like how this muscle sort of connects here at the top of the nose. That's the type of thing that I'm thinking of right now. But it's a lot of clay brush and clay and smooth brush. Let's add more meat here. More meat, more more volume, more meaty. And I think we need to add a bit more volume here around the eyelids. So one tip I can give you as well is when you're using references, try to, like if you're doing a face, for example, try to use like real faces, like real photos of faces, rather than just écorché or skulls like I have in here, because the real form ultimately, the the form and the shapes that you will really see on the face and you recognize on the face are mostly fat, not muscle. So it is important to understand the muscles and how they move about, and um, where they insert and all of that. But ultimately, what you see in terms of the volumes and the forms, when you're blocking things out as well, to think about that is just fat or mostly fat. So you know that that's what I was trying to achieve here with the eyelids or below the eyelids as well. Just a bit of fat in there. Otherwise, it just looks like a skull with some volumes on top. I don't know. Doesn't look as as real, or it doesn't feel as comfortably real. All right, I'm gonna define the eyelids a little bit, and I'll have a look at the chat. Not the eyelids, sorry, the lips with the damn standard brush. Alrighty. Yeah, let's see if there's any questions, and I can keep scolding away while I hopefully answer some of those. Thanks, Ibrahim. Glad you like this. Why sculpting a head still takes time, but when you use polygon modeling, you have 2 or 3 methods to create head, and it's done. Why sculpting do not have this approach? Not entirely sure what you mean. You mean like, as in, what's the difference between the approach that I'm doing right now and doing like box modeling type of thing? Not sure if that's the question. Is it possible to project alpha mask using projection master in the X and the Y axis at the same time? I don't know what that means, sorry. Stanislav. Projection master. Now, the projection master is just an image, so it wouldn't allow you to do. If I understand correctly, what you're trying to achieve is projecting an alpha that sort of wraps around the model. Not sure if that's what you mean. There's ways to work around it. You don't have to necessarily use the projection master. I don't know if that's the question. Let's do a quick save, and I'll show you in case that's what you're asking for. But it could be also something really good for everyone else. Let's say that you want to take a sphere. Let's just make this a polysphere. Right, so if you, let's say you have a sphere, this is a good kind of like tip for everyone. And you have multiple subdivision levels, right? And you have an image. Let's just select this standard brush. An image or an alpha, right? Like the star, maybe? I don't know. And if you do this one, maybe more resolution. And let's also change the focal shift a bit, right? If you want to apply this, and let's do another thing just to make it clear what I'm trying to achieve here. Object. Okay. So just imagine that the red area is the x-axis and the z color, sorry, the blue color is the z-axis, right? So if I click and drag this, turn off symmetry, this I don't know if that's gonna make sense. Hang on, I'll divide it a few more times and increase the intensity. So if I drag my sphere, my star, like so, and I wanna make sure that it encompasses the whole thing. There's going to be a lot of stretching in these areas because obviously it is being dragged from a specific angle. So I think that the question is how to do this so that it doesn't get distorted as much. And I'm assuming you're using the projection master so that you can actually paint or drag an alpha or something like that. So there's ways around it. One easy way to do it would be to let me add more subdivisions. Would be to resource to the UV master. So even if it is something simple like that and you have subdivision levels, you can go to this lowest to the lowest subdivision level. And I'm gonna go ahead and hold Control and Shift to isolate a portion of it and do a polygroup to essentially cut these two things in half. It doesn't have to be that specific cut. It could be something like this, right? And Control W, so you have like different polygroups. And I'm gonna go to the C plugin, go to the UV master, click on unwrap, and that basically gives me UVs, like quick UVs based on the polygroups. So Siri is gonna cut through the difference between this blue and red polygroup. And I still have the subdivision level. It's just that to do the UV master, you have to be in the lowest subdivision level so that it works. And then what I'll do is I have it here in my UI. I kind of like use it often, but you can go to the UV map subpalette here, and this is a pretty cool feature in ZBrush that allows you to pre-visualize that UV map. So you can click on Morph UV, and that brings you to this place. I forgot. Let me just go back. I'm gonna go to the highest subdivision level. I have 1.5 million, and I can do the Morph UV. Still is gonna do it pretty well. And now from this angle, this is pretty flat, right? I can go ahead and use the same idea of dragging that sphere or that star, and this is nothing to do with clicking and dragging an alpha. You can literally just sculpt in this mode, right? These type of things. Just gonna make something like that just to show you. So it's not gonna get distorted. I mean, it's gonna wrap around, but it's not necessarily getting distorted because you're basically adding this volume in this kind of like flat mode of the UV. And then you just need to click on Morph UV, and Siri is gonna wrap this back to this area. So it has the same kind of like distance, the same level. But yeah, it's a pretty easy way to go about it. Just using the UV master, also the UV master to generate UVs, and then the UV morph to do this type of thing. So that's one way to apply, and I'm not sure if that's the question, but to apply an alpha or an image or something like that in the Y and the X axis. And it doesn't have to be sculpting as well. You can just, right? You can click on UV master again. Another thing, by the way, this changed a bit because this is kind of like a preview. So if you created like a nice sculpting with a lot of volume, and then you went back to see the full sculpture, and then you went back like I just did here with the Morph UV, and you don't see the same level, that is just because this is just a preview and it's creating like a bump, and you can control that from this slider right here. But it's just a preview, so when you go back, it's gonna be the same, right? So what I was gonna say is that it doesn't have to be let's just undo a few of these things. It doesn't have to be like sculpting or anything like that. You can take your standard brush, let's just reset it really quickly, fill object, and you can paint. If this was an alpha, like if you were doing this in Photoshop, you can do this and sort of paint something like that. I don't know. And imagine that this is an alpha. In fact, let's just fill everything with dark, and this is more like what you would see. So you can paint an alpha. You can take this, what you have in here, send it to Photoshop as what's the name? I forgot. projection master. So you can send the projection master like so, paint whatever you want in Photoshop if that's your workflow, right? You do anything like that, bring it back into ZBrush like this, and it will be projected in this fashion, right? So everything that I'm doing here can be done in Photoshop and then projected back in, and then you can go back to Morph UV, and if you want to sculpt based on that now, you can use the masking palette, go to masking color, mask by intensity. That basically mask based on the difference between the highlights or white areas and the black areas. Now I can hide the poly paint, right? And I can use something like inflate to inflate that, right? And clear the mask. So that nice sculpting is done based on an image or whatever you want in Photoshop. So it's pretty cool. Anyway, let's go back to this guy. And it's still pretty blobby. This is the type of thing that I will spend some time polishing. So how are we doing with time? Oh, we have like 15 minutes. All right, so let me just refine this a tiny bit more, and I will give you some tips on how you can get rid of this blobbiness that is the result of now all of the sculpting and the high res mesh now, or the high resolution. And I'll show you how to, at this level, or in terms of the Dynamesh, how you can go about refining things a little bit more. This is a custom brush that I have. It's called a knife brush, and it is a very strong variation of the damp standard brush. Maybe you see, it's more like a /3, but in case you don't know what the /3 does, it's more like this damp standard brush, which is I think is more popular. But I think it's based on this /3, if I remember correctly. And it's just a very strong way to generate these lines. They're not details, they're just ways to refine kind of like the transition in certain areas. Alrighty. I think we're getting somewhere with this. What I like to do is maybe refine the eyelids a little bit because they look a bit blobby. So with the damp standard brush, I can hold the Alt key, and that's gonna give me this really sharp edge, which is what I want to achieve here for these eyelids. That's just holding the Alt key, and I'm gonna refine this lacrimal area as well. All right, not bad. Let's just do a bit of the polishing, and then to wrap up, I'm gonna do a quick poly paint pass, and then if I have time, I'll finish it up later. All right, so yeah, so if I wanna let's turn off this now. If I wanna start getting rid of all this bumpiness, again, it's just a matter of smoothing things out. But sometimes you know, when you have a lot of resolution, it's kind of like hard. You can also use the brush that comes with ZBrush, the smooth brush. So if you go to the smooth brush folder, you can use the smooth strong. This one is smooth stronger. You can double click on that, and that loads a smooth brush that is pretty strong. So, you know, that's the first thing I would use, a pretty strong brush to smooth out these areas. But my favorite tool to, let's say, get rid of, I don't know if it is very, actually, let's change the material so you can see better what I'm trying to do. So like these bumps in here, again, it's not very obvious in this area, but maybe here, it's like 4 different bumps that don't really feel that connected. You know, these type of things, I would use a bunch of different brushes to, not a bunch of brushes, but a variation of the brushes that come with ZBrush to adjust them. But here, this is probably an easy way to see this area around the temporal lobe here. So you can change the materials, right, just to make it easier. I'm going to leave it as this one, and I like to use the polish, not the polish H polish, but the polish O. So again, thumbnail, filter by the letter P, and click on polish, and that is a very nice brush that kind of like it wobbles the topology, and it sort of like averages the difference in here. So if I start doing this, it's kind of like smoothing, but at the same time it just polishes the surface. So this one is really good for going over an area like this and removing all of those bumps. It's kind of like a secret weapon after you do a Dynamesh. So let's say around this area, for example, and you can see the difference in the highlight now that this produces. It's a very nice brush that doesn't, you know, create like sharp edges as, you know, as opposed to the, let's say, the clay, no, the H polish, right? That gives you a very, very sharp set of planes. This one is a lot smoother. So it's just a great brush to do this process. Obviously, if you want something a little bit harsher, you can use the H polish, which is similar, but this one will give you a very, very straight set of planes. But you know, it will flatten those bumps as well. So for the purpose of polishing and refining this, it works just fine. You can just do that, and then, I mean, use the H polish to set the planes, and then use the smooth brush to go over that area. So I can use the maybe to refine that sort of sharp line here of the nose. All right. So to wrap up, because I only have 5 minutes more, let's go ahead and do some quick poly painting just to present this a little bit better. And yes, so reset brush. Here we go. I mean, in polygon modeling, you have a defined method for modeling the head, but in ZBrush does not have a method defined to sculpt a head. I'm sorry, I'm still struggling with the question. I kind of like get the general gist of it, but I don't understand what the method that you're referring to is in ZBrush. Yeah, I do both, Angus. Zero measure, manual topology. Sometimes I export it and do it somewhere else depending on what I need to do. Most of the time, I just use the manual retopology in ZBrush if I want to do something clean or want to create something clean for production or something. Let's fill that with a color. And let's just work on the polypaint a little bit. What's the time? Yeah, we have like a few minutes, hopefully. I was just checking that there's no one after me straight away, so yeah, I can do a bit of this. So I'm going to establish a quick color palette. Pretty bright set of colors, but this should help to set up a quick color palette, and then we can blend it a bit. Okay, I'm rushing this process quite a bit, but yeah, hopefully this helps or gives you a hint of how you can approach the something polished from a very blocky stage, which is pretty powerful as a way to establish the forms and the silhouette. It's just a matter of like spending time refining this. You know what? Let's just paint the eyes very quickly. And a cool thing that you can do is with the standard brush, select the drag rect as a stroke, and we can use something like alpha 58 just to drag in something like that. Maybe we can change the focal shift a little bit so it's a bit sharper. Subdivide that sphere a bit more. But with that, let's go with a darker color. All right, I'm just gonna turn off symmetry. Not symmetry, sorry, perspective. Find the iris.
with the smooth brush, you can also smudge the color a little bit if you have the RGB enabled, by the way. Now I'm just gonna change the alpha to something a bit softer. And just go for a brownish tone. Something like that. And I'm gonna reset that brush again. Go for a darker color here. At the top. And this is just a simple way to fake that sort of concave nature of the iris, of that part of the eye. And let's just add the pupil here. And let's change to a plastic toy material just to get some nice reflections for the eye, and apply that as a material. And there we go. And just for the sake of it, we still have like 2 more minutes. I'm gonna append sphere. And that's gonna be, just to give this guy some hair, maybe. Oh, that's kind of cool. with the move brush. You know what? We might also need to add some quick eyebrows as well. So I'm just gonna mask something like that, and use the distract function here. ZBrush. Just redynamish that bit. At this point, I'm just going very quick on this idea. It sort of like changes the whole dynamic of this, the expression of this guy quite a bit. And we can use something like the snake hook brush, maybe enable Sculptris Pro. Just going a little bit crazy here with this, but just to wrap something up that looks kind of like interesting. I'm going to use the standard brush. I'm going to reset that brush, and I'm going to use an alpha 8, and I'm going to change the stroke to spray, and I'm going to leave the Sculptris Pro enabled just to add a bit of, maybe that's too much. Just change, yeah, alpha light. Actually, I'm going to show you a free set of brushes that you can download from the ZBrush Guides website. It's called the Hairbrush. So you can use this. It's a set of brushes that I built to basically sculpt hair. That's what it is. So that's something you can use in this one, or maybe this is what I'm looking for. This is super rushed, but you get the idea. These are pretty cool brushes using in this way when you have like a block out, and then you can just spend some time adding some details. And if you use the Sculptris Pro with these brushes, this is exactly what I'm doing really. Just Sculptris Pro enable with the long hair brush. And I have a couple of tutorials as well, just showing a little bit of this process that I'm doing right now, but in a slightly more depth. Here's another really quick tip for you guys. You can use this standard brush to affect the model. So let's say do spray and alpha 8 to do this, but at the same time when you do this you can also enable RGB and paint at the same time as you affect the model. So this is what I'm doing for these bumps here at the back. Yeah. There we go. Cool, so I gotta go now. Let's see, last minute question. Manual topology, yep, hey there, what's the nice technique? No worries. Oh, hey Alejandro, how you doing, man? It will be nice if you show us how to retopologize zero mesh combination with C-modeler. Yeah, no, we won't have time for that right now. Cool. Awesome. All right, guys, so I'm going to leave it here. Hopefully you have found this useful. Again, if you haven't, just so you know, if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel and you want to get notifications when the new videos that I'm going to post this week are up, make sure that you do that. So there's going to be a series of masking tips that are pretty awesome, that they don't sound like as interesting as, oh, let's make a face or let's make a creature. The series is just called like masking tricks and tips for ZBrush, but it is a series of tips that I think are absolutely crucial for to speed up your workflow and have control of your form. So keep an eye on your email. If you're part of my email list, I will send another kind of like a roundup of all the videos once they're up. But the first one is already up on my YouTube channel, so you can watch that one. It's like 7 minutes or so, and I'm gonna try to upload one today, another tomorrow. So if you want to get notified, just check that app. And finally, there are some updates to the Geiger and Benczynski pack. So for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, so these brushes right here. No, those ones. Those ones are free. These ones, right? So this is the type of brush that you can get, like, you don't have to use it for like Geiger type of stuff. You can very easily use it in, create maybe like a scar type of thing, like that, right? So these brushes, I just did an update to the pack. So I just updated the tileable alpha, so you can use them in other software like Blender or Maya or whatever you want. Not necessarily the brushes, but the maps that the brushes use, or some of the maps that the brushes use, so you can, and they're tileable, so you can use it to create patterns. All right, so I'm gonna leave it here, guys. Thanks again for tuning in, and I will see you in a couple of weeks. And yeah, hopefully you found all of these useful. I'll see you next time.